All right, welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of June 7th, 2021. In accordance with LB 898, please be advised that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber by the northwest door. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a brief period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda. Under public hearing, anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The council shall require any member of the public desiring to address the council to identify themselves, the name of an organization or group, including an address that you may be representing by such person or group, unless the address requirement is waived to protect the security of the individual. The applicant then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating their name, address, organization, and whether you are speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last Mondays of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor plan for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Our first item of business for today's agenda, Monday, June 7, 2021, is the 2019 Honorable Mention Mayor's Award of Excellence recipients.
Good afternoon once again. It is great to be back and to have so many good things to be talking about with you all today. We're here to present, as you heard, the 2019 Mayor's Award of Excellence and Honorable Mention, and these were, of course, postponed for reasons you all know. Each January, all the monthly nominees and winners from the previous year are considered again for the annual award, and all nominations are reviewed by a committee, which includes a representative from each union as well as a non-union representative whom I appoint. And today we're presenting the annual award and an honorable mention award, and all of them were nominated for their outstanding service during the historic flooding that caused so much devastation back in the spring of 2019. It's, of course, been 2 years since then, but it still feels pretty fresh. We can all remember what it was like watching helicopters drop sandbags on the islands in the Platte River where our well field, some of our wells are located. That flood threatened our community's water supply. And the Honorable Mention Award goes to the team from Lincoln Transportation and Utilities that took emergency actions to make sure that Lincoln residents continued to have safe water to drink despite what we were experiencing in that historic storm. The team from the Water Production Division was nominated in the categories of Loss Prevention and Valor by LTU Assistant Director Donna Garden. And the five members of the team who played key roles during that emergency are Steve Owen, who is our Superintendent of Water Production and Treatment, Rick Roberts, the Assistant Superintendent of Maintenance for Lincoln Water System, Corbin Harms, the Assistant Superintendent of Electrical and Control for Lincoln Water System, Eric Lee, the Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Water Production and Treatment for Ashland Water Production, and John Keith, who is the Manager of Laboratory Services for our Ashland Water Production. In addition to honoring all of these folks for their loss prevention efforts and their valor, Donna Garden nominated them for their leadership, their knowledge, and their positive can-do spirit, and their attitude that failure is not an option. She said that these 5 employees represent the entire teams in Ashland and in Lincoln, and she said all team members deserve recognition for their dedication, and I certainly agree with her. In her nomination, Garden wrote, "A group of dedicated, knowledgeable, true professionals are responsible for keeping Lincoln's water flowing to Lincoln and keeping it safe to drink. More than just these 5 individuals, the entire Lincoln Water team working at our Ashland facility gave their all to maintain operations. Everything from securing airboats and working long hours in flooded conditions to flying in helicopters to access necessary equipment. something none of them could have foreseen when they signed up to be water department employees. She continued that she cannot say enough or express enough gratitude to this group of individuals. They truly did save the day for Lincoln. They continue their professionalism in the repair of our well fields. We are in good hands because of them. So please join me in congratulating the entire team and especially these 2019 Honorable Mention Award recipients. And I'll ask for both Steve Owen and Eric Lee, who are here, to please come forward. And LTU Director Liz Elliott is here to say a few words and congratulate the team as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Elizabeth Elliott, LTU Director. I just want to take a quick moment to thank this team and the entire Water Department staff. They did a tremendous job back in 2019, and again, were there for us in 2020 in March again. And they just do a tremendous job. Our residents can rest easy knowing that they're there and we'll have water not just during emergencies, but every day. So this team is extraordinary and does amazing things day in and day out and often aren't recognized. So thank you both, and to the entire team, thank you.
Okay, would either of you care to come up and say a few words? Eric, did you want to come up and say a few words?
Well, I want to thank everybody for all the recognition that we received. It's truly an honor to get the honorable mention in there. So there were a lot of stressful hours, harrowing experiences on this. Like Steve said, and even Liz, you know, this was a complete team effort. We're only 2 people in that entire team out there. So we managed to make it through it. Everybody had safe water. And we really appreciate all the accolades and admiration for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give them another. It's now my honor to present the annual Mayor's Award for Excellence to the 8 members of Lincoln Fire and Rescue who serve on the Nebraska Task Force 1. The task force is an urban search and rescue team based in LFR. And I'd love for the honorees to stand as I introduce you. The team members include Captain Daniel Ripley, the task force leader, Captain Mark Majors, the rescue team manager, firefighter Robert Simons, medical specialist, firefighter Amanda Benson, water specialist, firefighter Justin Henkel, water specialist, and firefighter Webster Harris, a water specialist who was also a member of the team, but now is a firefighter in another community on the West Coast, so he's unable to join us today. Captain Ripley nominated all of these members of Nebraska Task Force 1 in the category of valor for their historic and heroic actions in responding to the March 2019 flooding in the areas of Columbus and Monroe, Nebraska. On March 14th that year, the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency activated the task force to help rescue trapped flood victims. And Ripley said it was one of the most challenging environments that the task force had seen. Where there were winds of more than 60 miles an hour. The temperatures were in the 20s. There were extremely intense water currents with waves and debris like vehicles, not just little things, vehicles and ice chunks and the size of trucks that were moving downstream. So at times the conditions were too dangerous for the rescuers to remain in the water, and rescues had to be conducted by helicopter. And despite these conditions, Nebraska Task Force 1 was able to rescue 18 civilians and 6 animals over 2 days. So Ripley wrote that the task force members acted with the utmost bravery and heroism, placing themselves in harm's way to save the lives of others. So I hope you will please join me in just a heartfelt congratulations to these team members. Fire chief. He was a firefighter. Now he's the chief. Dave Engler is here to say a few words about the task force and to congratulate them.
Yes, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Dave Engler, Fire Chief. I'm just really proud of these individuals today. They're part of Nebraska Task Force 1, which there are 28 FEMA task forces across the United States. We're incredibly lucky to have them here in Lincoln. And as you can see, not only do they travel throughout the United States, but we benefit from their services close to home. They're the best of the best. They're specially trained above what the normal firefighters train for, and they have the ability to perform all types of rescues. Our team specializes in water rescue, which came in handy during that flooding time period. But like I said, they are the best of the best. We're very proud of them, and we thank you for your support of having this team in Lincoln, Nebraska. We certainly appreciate it, and our community benefits from it. Thank you.
Would any of the team like to come up and say a few words?
Dan Ripley, Fire Captain with Lincoln Fire. Again, it's a great honor to be here. Thank you for supporting our task force, Chief Engler, City Council members, and Mayor. I really wish you guys could see what these members do, and especially to be able to do it in our own backyard in Columbus and Monroe. The risk that they took, granted we take calculated risk, they did without hesitation. And this is just such a small window of thank you to you guys for what you did. But if you guys could look back, I know in 20 years and see the sacrifices and with the positions you put yourself in, your family, I know our family in the city are very thankful for what you guys do every day. So, and again, it was something that was really great for us to be able to do in our backyard. Like Chief English said, we usually go all over the country. We get to go to hurricanes and floods and tornadoes, but to be able to just respond quickly and efficiently, thanks to the dedicated members of our team, was great. So thank you for your support. It's an honor to be able to receive this award for our task force, but it's an even greater honor for us to serve our city and our state and our nation as a part of this FEMA Urban Search and Rescue team. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We are truly honored and fortunate to have these incredible teams at LFR and LTU serving our community and beyond our borders. And I'd like to invite them out into the hall to take some pictures at this time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you so much, everyone, and congratulations to all the recipients. All right, next item of business.
Our next item of business is sections 1 and 2 of our council agenda.
Is there anyone that would like to testify on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing no one, please go through the list.
Item 1A is reappointing Jasmine Kingsley to the Lincoln Lancaster County Board of Health for a term to expire April 15, 2024, introduced by Washington.
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1B is reappoint James Michael Bowers to the Joint Budget Committee for a 2-year term to expire May 31st, 2023, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1C is appoint Sandra Washington to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for a 1-year term to expire May 31st, 2022, introduced by Washington.
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Washington.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1D is appoint Tom Beckius and Richard McGinnis to the City Performance Audit Committee for a 2-year term to expire May 31st, 2023, introduced by Washington.
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Ward. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Ward.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1E is reappoint Benny Schob to the City Performance Audit Committee for a 2-year term to expire May 31st, 2023, introduced by Washington.
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Beckius.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1F is reappoint Jane Raybold and James Michael Bowers to the Railroad Transportation Safety District Board for a 1-year term to expire May 31st, 2022, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman Schob. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
McGinnis.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1G is appoint Tom Beckius to the Railroad Transportation Safety District Board for a 1-year term to expire May 31st, 2022, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Schob.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1H is appoint Benny Schob to the Telecommunications Cable Television Advisory Board to carry out the remainder of the term to expire July 1st, 2021, introduced by Washington.
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion?
Thank you.
May we please have a roll call vote?
Raybold.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Yay.
Item 1I is approving the distribution of funds representing interest earnings on short-term investments of idle funds during the month ended April 30th, 2021, introduced by Beckius.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Beckius.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 1J is setting the Board of Equalization hearing date of Monday, June 28, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. on the College View Maintenance Improvement District, Havelock Maintenance Improvement District, North 27th Street Maintenance Improvement District, South Street Maintenance Improvement District, University Place Maintenance Improvement District, and the West O Street Maintenance Improvement District, introduced by Beckius.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Washington. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Raybold.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Schob.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Beckius.
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay. Move on to section 4 is our public hearing liquor resolutions. I'll call items 4A and 4B together. And full correction on item 4B, the name of the manager application should read as Chloe Marshall and not Paul Marshall.
Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to the next item, please.
Item 4C and 4D I'll be calling together is approval of the CBOCS West Inc. doing business as Cracker Barrel number 365 for a Class CK liquor license located at 6700 North 27th Street and the related manager application of David A. Mather.
Hi, Jessica Greenwald, 121 South 13th Street, Suite 800, here on behalf of the applicant. Pretty straightforward application for a liquor license at the Cracker Barrel for a CK license. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council members may have.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming down, Ms. Greenwald.
Certainly.
I'm just curious, is this a trend for Cracker Barrel to have liquor licenses now?
It is. I actually was just up in Sarpy County a couple weeks ago. They applied, so it's just a nationwide, nationwide press to sell alcohol now at all the locations.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, Seeing none, thank you so
All right,
much.
Thank you.
All right, I believe we are now ready for the voting session of the liquor resolutions.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve these 4 items.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman Ward. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay, section 5 is our public hearing resolutions. I'll be calling items 5A, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 21008, application of the Urban Development Department Director for a proposed amendment to the Antelope Valley redevelopment plan to add 25th and Vine redevelopment project to include 2 apartment buildings with 36 unit, including 6 units of affordable housing on property generally located at 25th and Vine Streets.
Good afternoon. I was checking to see if we had anyone from Urban Development here.
You have, yep, Dan is here.
Oh, wonderful. Dan, would you like to introduce?
We have a great developer here, though, that is willing to do a project on Vine Street at 25th. I think there's some issues with a street light or a pedestrian light, but we're working through all of those issues. And what this will be a 36-unit apartment complex, of which they will provide 6 of them to be affordable in that area. And I think there's some issues that this went through Planning Commission with, I think we had one testifier come up and discuss the median in Vine Street. We've since investigated that. We think the water's working, but we have covered that. If that was an issue with the redevelopment area, we could address that through the plan amendment or through the plan area that's before you. And I think council's always interested in alley pavements, and I think that we will be able to address some of those issues as well. So all around, I think this is a great proposal by, really just a person that's been really good to work with on redevelopment issues as well. That's all I have. I'll answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Director Marvin? Councilman McGinnis?
All we're voting on today is a change in the comp plan? Is there a redevelopment agreement in here?
There's not a redevelopment agreement before you yet.
Okay.
Councilwoman Raybold?
Mr. Marvin, typically when they say that there will be 6 units of affordable housing on the property, how long will those 6 units be available as affordable housing? Is there a timeline?
During the TIF period.
During the TIF period. And the TIF period for this one is
20
15?
years.
20, okay.
Any further questions for Director Marvin? Councilman Schob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Marvin, you said you described the developer, used an adjective to describe him. Would you repeat that again? What type of developer he is?
He's really been good to work with. I think everything's a source of give and take, and he's been really easy to work with, and so that's not always the case. So not that people in Lincoln are difficult to work with, that's not true, but exceptionally gracious and easy to work with.
I was looking for the word great.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Director Marvin? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Okay.
That didn't do any better, did it?
Now it's our turn. Wonderful. Well, my name is Ann Post. I'm an attorney with Baylor Ebden Law Firm. I'm here on behalf of the developer, LA Real Estate. With me is Aaron Bird, the owner of LA Real Estate. And so we're here today in support of this. This is the plan amendment and for the 25th and Vine redevelopment project. This project will assemble 7 different parcels of property to build 36 units, a 36-unit multifamily housing project. It'll actually be in 2 buildings with 18 units each. I have some elevations to give you an idea of what we are looking at building. These are elevations that have obviously been through Urban Design Committee. You can see actually that this is bringing the buildings right up to the setback line on Vine Street. And then if I turn it over, you can see from the back that our access will actually be from the alley to the back. Right now, it's anticipated that we will actually pave the entire alley on the north side of the project as we take access from that side of the building. So with that, next step is we have a lot of exciting aspects to this project. We're going to work through with a redevelopment agreement that we hope to bring in front of you soon. With that, I would just like to try not to repeat anything else Director Marvin said, and we're here to answer any questions for you.
Are there any questions? Councilwoman Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may have said this before we delayed the hearing in action till today, but have either one of you had discussions with the neighbors? This is close to a lot of other projects that we've worked on in that area, or how they're feeling about your project. Either one of you, doesn't matter.
No, we haven't heard any feedback from the neighborhood about the project. To my knowledge, we did have one person show up at Planning Commission, as Director Marvin mentioned, with some comments on the medians, some comments on snow removal, both things that are concerns for the area, but not as directly related to this project.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any further questions? Councilman McGinnis?
This will come back to us as a community unit plan? Is that how they're doing this?
There'll be a community unit plan in front of the Planning Commission on Wednesday. That's going to include both setbacks or waivers for setbacks, for reduced setbacks, also a parking reduction. We're looking at a 1.5 parking ratio down from 1.75. I believe with the community unit plan, that's going to be final action at Planning Commission. But Director Marvin or someone can correct me if that's wrong, but I believe it should be final action there.
Mm-hmm.
But then there will be the redevelopment agreement. We'll come back to council.
Councilwoman Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Ms. Post. Of course, waivers always bring questions. So now, on the parking waiver going to 1.5, what's the size makeup of the unit? So I know it's 36 units, 6 are affordable, but 1-bedroom, studios, 2-bedroom, what are we looking at?
I believe we're at 2-bedroom units. Is that correct?
2-bedroom, 1 bath.
Okay. And are there any other waivers you're looking for besides parking and setback?
I believe parking and setback were the waivers that we needed for this project. I don't believe there are any other material waivers.
And the front setbacks or the sideline setbacks?
I believe front and side setbacks.
They're considered two fronts.
That's right. They're considered two front.
Corner.
Thank you.
I know that it was, we had to go through several iterations to actually get up to the 1.5 parking ratio. As to any infill project, parking is the biggest issue. And so I know that one reason that we have been working with Director Marvin for so long on this project, and he has so many great things to say, is because we had to go through so many iterations to find a configuration, to work with our architect and our engineer that could actually get us to a 1.5 parking ratio.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Nope.
Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next one, please.
Item 5B is accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for May 1st through May 15th, 2021.
Is there anyone that would like to speak on this item? Come on up. And just please tell us your name and your address.
My name is Kobe Perney. I'm at 5412 West Cleveland. I have a pending claim against the city for a water main break that I was looking at reimbursal on.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
So there is, on my homeowner's side, in between the sidewalk and the street, there is a grass location there where a tree had been planted by the city. I think it was about 12 years ago. And the city planted this tree. I purchased it for $60. And how the tree has been growing, it pushed up the sidewalk. And where the sidewalk was located was a water main valve. And when it pushed up the sidewalk connecting to that valve, it broke that open and caused a leak that cost me approximately $3,000 to fix within a week's time. So it was a significant impact for the family. So
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. I'm sorry, what's your last name again?
Perney.
For Mr. Perney? Councilwoman Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Perney. I just want to make sure I've got this in order. So the street tree, or the tree between the sidewalk and the street, was planted by the city?
Yes.
And you said you paid for the tree?
Yes.
Okay, so this was part of this, I think, the street tree program?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right. Did you have any other responsibility for the tree? Did you choose the kind of tree you wanted?
No,
or-
I did not
So
choose.
the city said, here's the tree, and this is where we're planting
Yeah.
it? Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Does anyone have, Councilwoman Raybold?
Thank you, Mr. Perney. How long was the tree growing in that spot?
The tree had been planted approximately like 12 years before, something
Okay.
similar to that. But it was discussed by my plumber, by the city sidewalk company, the city water, and they've all discussed with me that the impact of that tree pushing that sidewalk up. I've had reports by the city where I've actually had the sidewalk replaced once before where it had lifted it several inches. So this is pretty much the second round that I've dealt with the sidewalk issue of that tree moving it. So
And just to confirm, you had no direction on the placement of that tree. It
No.
was the city's decision entirely. Okay, thank you.
yes.
Councilwoman Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Perney, the bill you received was for water damage of, just so I'm clear, is that correct? So your plumber came to fix water damage from?
There
Is that
was no water damage. It was just a water main break, and the city says that if it's on my side of the water main, then it's my responsibility.
Okay.
So
okay.
I had to absorb that cost.
For the break.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I think I'd like to hear from our city attorney.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Sure, yeah. Are
Thank
there
you,
any,
Mr. Perney.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Perney? So here's what will happen is our city attorney will come up, provide some information, answer some questions. Then you'll have an opportunity to provide a rebuttal to what the city attorney says. Okay. Then once we move on to that, then we have two other items in the resolutions. So when we move on from that, then we'll have two other items. Then we go into a voting session. So when we get to 5B, that's when we'll vote on to remove your claim or to keep it in there. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So even though we move on, we're going to come back to it at the voting session.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you, Councilwoman Ward?
Chairman Bowers, I'd like to ask one more question,
Sure.
or I'd like to have Lynn Johnson, Director Parks and Rec, come forward.
Okay.
I just whenever that's possible, but I'm curious. Do you know what kind of tree it was? The species?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember the name
Okay.
of it. I know the city forestry has told me it's some sort of hybrid, so.
Okay. Someone is approaching with an answer? Okay. All right.
Good afternoon, Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. Let me introduce Lori Gruber, our Community Operations Forester, and Lori has more information about this tree.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Lori Gruber, Community Operations Forester. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are you familiar with this tree?
Yes.
What kind of tree is it?
It was a hybrid elm. The tree was planted in 2014. That, according to our records, that's what we have, that it was planted in 2014, so 7 years old.
Okay. This was the second time, Mr. Perney said this is the second time the sidewalk had been pushed up by this tree. And I'm curious, are you seeing this happen with this tree in other locations?
Elms are by nature shallow-rooted trees, but we are using them all over the city. It is of my opinion that this tree was not large enough to cause this damage. Tree roots grow in the presence of water. They can't break through, and they can't break steel. If there's a hairline crack, the roots can get in there and grow, but I do not think that the tree caused this break.
And what about the tree pushing up the sidewalk?
I don't know about that. Previously, unless the sidewalk people contact us about a tree, we don't always know about sidewalk tree conflicts.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Raybold?
And when you choose to place a tree and plant a tree, what is the process that you go through?
It has changed over the past 5 years. We used to do blanket plantings where streets, we have a book where certain streets would get this type of tree. With the advent of emerald ash borer and other invasive exotic species of plants, we are giving property owners more leeway. So when they use the street tree voucher program, if there is a tree that we do not want them to use, then we say you can choose any tree except this tree. That likely was not the case with Mr. Perney. He likely got the tree that was on that street. So what we look at right now is the next big bug that's coming is Asian longhorn beetle, and its primary plant that it goes after are maple trees. So we are not allowing maple trees to be planted on the streets because we don't want to be perpetually removing our street trees like we are our ash trees right now. We look at how much right-of-way space there is. Another tree that we don't allow a lot of right now are crab apples because they're short and wide. As beautiful as they are, they're short and wide. We need 14 feet of clearance over the street, and they just take a beating. So my two inspectors and myself, we're the ones that mark out for the street tree vouchers, and we assess the site. And like I said previously, if there's a tree that we think is not going to work there, then we'll say that tree is not allowed.
I guess I was going to ask you, do you call Diggers Hotline to make sure that you can clear some electrical and water lines just to be on the safe side? Because it does become the homeowner's responsibility from that segment of that pipe that connects to the main.
We as the city do not contact Diggers Hotline, but it is on the voucher that the installing entity, whether it's the homeowner or the nursery from where they purchased it or a private individual, it is federal law that they contact Diggers Hotline before digging anything. And we do have our design standards as part of the municipal code. And so all of our trees are marked at least 5 feet away from these the water boxes. We have distances that we have to stay away from driveways, from street lights, from street signs, from intersections. So we mark out these trees based on all of that information.
And so since this is, you said, a shallow root tree, how deep are the water boxes then? For the
I don't know.
Mainly. Oh, okay.
That I don't know.
Okay.
That's water. I don't step on LTU's toes.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious because if the roots are shallow, but then how deep is the water
Or the
line?
sidewalks.
Or the what?
Or the sidewalks. I mean, if
Or
we
the
know they're
sidewalk.
going to heave sidewalks because they're shallow rooted.
Any further questions? I just had a question. So you think that it wasn't the tree that caused the water main to break?
Correct.
Okay.
And because of the size of the tree, as trees go, it's very small. It's a 9-inch diameter, or was. It has since been removed, but a 9-inch diameter tree. So it's very young in the life of the tree. We have had some of the large pin oaks that have over 60 years, ground has settled, and that weight certainly has caused some damage. But
when we put trees in, do we tell folks about the potential risks or liabilities that could come from having a tree? Like if we put in a tree, do we give them a heads up that this might cause an issue later on?
no.
Okay.
Technically, no.
All right. Any further questions?
May I speak?
Well, actually, so we'll have you have a seat. We'll have our city attorney come up, and then when the city attorney gets done, then we'll call you back up to provide a rebuttal, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And if you want to hang out too for a little bit in
Okay.
case we have further questions.
Thank you.
Hansi Christie, City Attorney.
Are there any, do you have any information you want to provide for us?
I don't think so. This was in there, but it's my understanding there was a call March 4th because of a leak. City went out there and scheduled removal of the tree so that the tree would not get damaged from repair that was scheduled. And so at that point in time, it was not the position from the city that the tree was getting removed because it was causing the leak. The city at that time understood that there was going to be work done to fix the leak. And so at that point in time, the city said, we will remove the tree because the tree will get damaged when they go in there to fix the leak. So I just want to be clear about that time frame. And then I think the complaint came, we received it April 20th, but I think he probably submitted it looks like April 16th maybe. So just wanted to be clear on that timeline.
So when you say the complaint came in, or who was notified on March 4th? Who notified?
I think it came through
Noticed an increased amount of water usage?
Flicks. Yes, and I think it was because of, they were contacted because of a leak, I think is what the information was, on March 4th, I believe.
Councilwoman Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Christie, do you have a record of what caused the leak if it wasn't the tree? Or maybe that's a question for Mr. Perney. So
I do not.
You do not. So what I want to ask you then is philosophically, because I'm not a plumber, I'm not an arborist, but I am a homeowner, and if I had a tree planted, and here comes Director Elliott, maybe it's a question for her, but you can see why the city puts in a tree, the city puts in a sidewalk, the water main breaks, and I get the $3,000 bill as the homeowner. So for me, there's the moral justice issue here of what I feel like is that departments aren't talking to each other, or I will ask Director Elliott, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, do we know what caused the water main break, if in fact it wasn't the tree?
I don't have those specific records available right now. One option for you would be, if you wanted to continue it, I can pull those records and provide some additional information. I will just kind of echo what Ms. Gruber had stated. Very, very rarely is it the actual tree that causes these breaks. And with a tree this young, I'm doubtful that it was the tree that caused it. But we definitely would have records of that, so I can definitely look into it and pull that information and provide that to you.
When you're pulling that information, Director, would you also go back and pull the sidewalk repair from earlier? Because I'm very curious if what might have happened with the sidewalk repair, and if the sidewalk had started to heave again before the water main break this time. I'm just trying to understand all the pieces that are moving.
Right, absolutely. And if the sidewalk was fairly new, we would not expect it to be heaving so quickly. So I will get that information to all of you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Raybold?
And then, Liz, I would also be curious, how deep is that box? You know, how typically, is it like 3 feet? Is it
It
4
really
feet?
depends on what area of town you are in and how old it is. So right now, I would not say there's a set, every one of them is 3 feet deep or something like that.
So that was my other question, like how old is the line that was like, or how old is the home?
And we
are
should
you
have all of that on our TAP records that
Okay.
we could provide.
Any further questions for Director Elliott or City Attorney Christie? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Perney, if you want to come back up and provide a rebuttal and provide another opportunity for us to ask you any questions. Is there anything that you would like to say in response to anything that they said?
Yeah, I wasn't prepared on what I actually needed to bring, but I had submitted several documents. I'm actually a quality inspector myself, so I mean, I know how inspections go and pretty thorough about that at Kawasaki, but I can see they actually have all the documents that I submitted that show the size of the tree, how much it lifted up, what they had to remove. Like I said previously, the plumber, the Lincoln Water Department, and the Lincoln Sidewalk all discussed with me that the tree had been pushed. After thinking about this the last couple days, if I could show you guys a picture. Sorry, it's not the best print, but this is actually my neighbor's tree, and it's was put in nearly the exact same time as mine was, and you can see the diameter of it. And this is the very next house of mine, and you can see the color of the sidewalk right where the middle of the tree is, because that sidewalk for theirs has already been replaced too, due to their tree lifting up. Granted, mine was a lot higher than that, but this one had already been replaced previously too. And on my next, I got another picture too. It's in its current state is it's actually lifting up a little bit too, probably about maybe an inch. You know, just since I think they replaced their sidewalk about the same mine last time. I think it's been maybe 3 years ago. And then with discussion on the size, this is one picture I'd printed. What discussion? This is one picture of a tree root with my hand on it, just to, you know, because my wife wasn't there, just to show her the picture of just one of the tree roots that they had to dig out. And if they have the documents showing what I submitted before, it was just a nightmare of roots just covering that. And on your question about the depth of that, I also submitted some pictures that show how deep that was, and it was approximately 3 feet. And you can see another picture I submitted of the valve that was connected to the sidewalk, and it was actually pulled up to where it actually split open.
It was, Mr. Perney, it was pulled up by a root, or what did it?
They had located the water main valve that has like a keyway hole down to the valve underground, and that connection right there was in the sidewalk. And so the tree root pushed up the sidewalk, and it pulled that whole valve up and snapped it.
Okay.
So.
Any further questions for Mr. Perney? I just have one question. You said that the plumber that came out to fix it, did the plumber say that it was because of the tree roots?
Yes, and I had, when I submitted my report to, I believe, the county attorney, he has all that information and a signed document by the plumber himself, so.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Perney? Okay, so again, like what happens now is we'll have you have a seat. We'll move on to items 5C and 5D. Then we go into our voting session. We'll vote on 5A first, then we'll get to 5B. Kind of the options in front of us are to either accept the claims report as is, which means that you would be on the hook for the $3,000, or we would vote to remove your claim, which would then grant you the $3,000, or we could vote to remove with a delay, which means that would provide more time for more information. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, so if you want to have a seat, thank you so much for coming out. Councilwoman Raybold?
I was hoping to ask our city attorney on one other of the claims, unless there's someone else who is here to speak on another claim.
Yep. Come on up.
Welcome back.
My name is Kaylee Schulich, 740 Cottonwood Drive, and I have a pending claim for an accident. My car was parked and a city truck hit my vehicle. It happened in April, and you guys first talked about this a few weeks ago, and I wasn't able to be here. I had emailed information, and it sounded like you guys had some questions about what happened. So,
Are there any questions? Councilwoman
It
Raybold?
was, yes, Ms. Schulich, I wanted to know, has your insurance company also filed a claim with the city on this? Or?
they told us they were going to, but I don't think that was included. I don't know if it was including my deductible or the rental car.
And so your car insurance does not provide for a car rental, and that's why you included
No,
it?
they did not.
Okay,
No.
so your claim includes your deductible of $500 and
Yep.
then the car rental.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the total damage was almost $4,000. It was like $3,900.
Do you have some pictures to show?
I
the
submitted them via email. I can pull them up on my phone. I don't know if it'll show up on here. I was parked on M Street in a parking meter stall, and they were doing work in front of the state office building there. And the city truck was parked, like double parked parallel next to me, and I was leaving work. I work at the office building there. And I was leaving to go out to my car, and I asked him if I was going to be able to get my car out because I was completely blocked in on all sides. And one of the gentlemen said they'd move that truck out of the way. I had put my stuff in my vehicle in the back, and then went around to the driver's side door, and I was, they were parked pretty close to me, so I only had the driver's side door open enough to throw my stuff in. And as I was getting in the vehicle, he moved the truck and caught my door. So my door was only open probably this much when he hit me, which you can see from the picture. It like kind of crunched it that way. It wasn't open very far. So when I had submitted the claim originally, my husband spoke with the city attorney, and the reason we were given that they weren't reimbursing or approving the claim then was because they said I opened my door after he started moving, which isn't what happened. So I'm not sure where that information came from, because I was already in my car about to shut the door. So.
And so did the car door have to be completely replaced?
Yes, and then it's a minivan. I have a sensor on the side door that had to be replaced, and it was the outer shell of the door they had to replace. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Johansi Christie, City Attorney. I do have a picture, just a better picture. It's the same picture that she put up, I think, if you wanted to see it. Do I have to push something? No. And there was a, the reason why we denied the claim, there was also a officer, I believe, that came and did an investigation and talked to both drivers of the vehicle. It was our understanding that the city employee was asked to move the vehicle. City employee looks in both directions, then moves forward. I think he's going forward, and as he started moving at some point, he believed that she went in and opened the door to get in while he was moving. When the officer talked to both the city employee and the claimant, Port stated that I think she was driver entered the vehicle and began moving forward, and Jack, which is on the rear passenger corner of the vehicle, struck the front driver's side of the door, which was partially open. The driver stated when he got into the truck, the owner of the vehicle was at the back of her van. He did not know that she was opening her door to get into her vehicle when he began moving forward. The owner of the vehicle, the claimant, stated she opened her door just enough to get into her vehicle, and she did not know the vehicle was going to begin moving forward when she got into her vehicle. Owner of the vehicle had her vehicle towed as the front driver's side door would not close properly after the accident. So the thought process, at least from our perspective, was that there was a request to move the vehicle. I believe the city employee was outside of the vehicle, got in the vehicle, and then began moving. And so as far as the question of negligence, we were of the opinion that both parties would pay for their own damages. Essentially, that whatever negligence, the way that the negligence standard works is that if we are not more than 50%, then we do not pay, is the thought process.
Are there any further questions for City Attorney Christie? Councilwoman Washington?
Mr. Christie, so what we just heard was that she was putting things in her car, And it sounded like she had opened up one door and put things in, and then opened it up for herself and got into the car. And so I'm not an attorney. I wasn't there. I wasn't a witness, so I don't know where where the dividing line rests between responsibility, whether it's 50-50, 60-40, something other than 50-50. But I can certainly see where this accident could have happened, but it does not sound like she was outside her vehicle. If she had been outside her vehicle, she would have probably been hit before the door was hit. So she was in the vehicle, shutting the door. The driver backed the city vehicle up, or moved it forward, and the jack hit it. How do you come to, without eyewitnesses other than the two participants, how do you come to your understanding?
Well, and I think that's why initially I was referencing the police report, but really all we can do is talk to the witnesses who were there, obviously the driver and the claimant, any other witnesses in the area, which we don't have any. There may have been some, but we don't have any. And then any report that was given immediately after the incident, which would be the officer's report. And then if I understand your question correctly, I mean, at least in the courtroom setting, it would just be, testimony and a judge or jury listening to the witnesses and deciding.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Christie? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Oh, can I amend? Can I ask one
Oh,
more
yeah,
question?
yeah.
In the last few weeks, have you gotten a claim from the insurance company?
My understanding is no, we have not.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Did you want to provide a response?
I had pointed that out in the email I sent. If what the driver is saying is true, that I opened the door after he started moving, he would have actually hit me and not my car. I mean, because I was standing in between the jack and the door. And I had the door open for, a good 30 seconds or so before he hit it, because I had a backpack and my lunchbox. I had a bunch of stuff in my hands I was putting in my car. And like I said, it was parked parallel, so my door is here and the jack is here. It only took a couple seconds for him to pull forward and hit my door. So,
Any further questions? Kind of same thing that we said earlier is we got to go through 5C, 5D, then we'll go back for the voting session. That's when we'll discuss your claim, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next item of business, please.
Item 5C is renaming of Heritage School Building as Cunningham School District 113.
Good afternoon again. Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. The action that is before the City Council this afternoon is a resolution to rename the one-room schoolhouse that is located out at the Pinehurst Park Nature Center. That was one of two buildings that were relocated from the State Fairgrounds to Pinehurst Park, the other one being the Hudson Cabin at the time that the State Fair was moved to Grand Island. The building came to us with the name of Heritage School. There is a letter, attached to this agenda item from Dr. John Neal with Lincoln Public Schools regarding some research that they did. As they looked into the history of this building, they found that it had originally been located north of Valparaiso, and that it was named Cunningham School because a man named John Cunningham provided the land on which the school was located, and it was in District 113. And so Lincoln Public Schools approached us about renaming the building as Cunningham School District 113. This has been reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. It comes to you with a recommendation for the renaming. If the City Council approves this renaming, we'll place an interpretive plaque there with information about the history of the building. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Dr. Johnson? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item of business.
Item 5D is approving amendment number 1 to the conditional zoning agreement for 8801 Holdridge.
Liz Elliott, Director of Lincoln Transportation and Utilities. This is a project that is part of our Lincoln on the Move program. This was bid out, and when the bids came back, they were higher than our original estimates. Therefore, as part of our agreement with them, we did do an interactive process with the developers to develop a solution for this, and that is what this amendment covers. I will mention, since I am here, you will be seeing a few more of these agreements coming through over the next few weeks. A number of our construction bids are coming in higher than the estimates were. So we are going through on a case-by-case basis, working with each developer to come up with a solution for each project. So we will be here, so if there are any questions, we can answer them, but this is just the first of a few that you will be seeing.
Are there any questions for Director Elliott?
I'm just kind of curious, Director Elliott, what is the percentage difference in the estimate to the actual?
Each one is varying a little bit. I would have to double check on this one. This was not a huge percentage. Some of them have been, 20% higher or a little bit more on some of these, but we are working with the developers and are confident that we'll be able to find solutions for each project.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thanks so much, Director.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the voting session for these resolutions.
Item 5A is Comprehensive Plan Conformance 21008, application of the Urban Development Department Director for proposed amendment to the Antelope Valley Redevelopment Plan to add 25th and Vine redevelopment project to include 2 apartment buildings with 36 units, including 6 units of affordable housing on property generally located at 25th and Vine Streets, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5B is accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for May 1st through May 15, 2021, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Councilwoman Raybold.
I'd like to introduce a motion to amend number 1, which is to remove Brenda Wiltshire's denial claim from the list of denied claims, and I can give you a reason why.
Second.
Due to a schedule conflict, claimant has requested that her claim be rescheduled, and so it'll be rescheduled.
When would you like that to be rescheduled for? Just the next time
I
we
think
review it?
it's the next round of
2 weeks.
pending claims,
Okay.
typically 2 weeks.
So moved and seconded by Washington to delay that claim. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Raybold?
Well, I guess we have to vote on this motion first.
Yeah.
We've got another one. Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion to motion to remove from the denied to delay it? Okay, may we please do a roll call vote on that motion to amend?
Raybold,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, so that motion went through. Now we open up to discussion on the main motion. Councilwoman Raybold.
I'd like to make another motion to remove the claim from Ms. Kaylee Kuchek. Hopefully I said that name. Kulik. From the denied to approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Ward. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councilwoman Washington.
I've looked at this one for a few weeks now, and as I look at it, it seems like it's almost impossible for her, as she had said, if her car door was open and she was putting things in, certainly the city driver was waiting until she got into the vehicle or until the door was shut. But there must have been a visual thing that the driver did not see, that she was still getting into her vehicle when he started to move forward. I'm counting getting into the vehicle as hasn't shut the door yet. Stuff has gotten into her, you know, she's dropped her backpack or whatever. She got into the car, hadn't shut the door yet, and he started to move forward. And it feels like that is a mistake. It's an accident, but it's the city's responsibility.
Any further discussion on that? Okay, seeing none. We have a motion on the floor that was seconded. We had discussion. Can we please do a vote on that motion?
Raybold?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, that motion passed. Councilwoman Raybold.
I have one more motion. I would like to remove Mr. Perney's claim from denied to delay, and we will give Lincoln Transportation and Utility time to get answers back to us.
Okay, so there's a motion to remove it from denied to delayed. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Councilwoman Ward. Any discussion?
Mr.
Councilwoman
Chair.
Ward.
Yeah, I would just thank you, Councilwoman Raybold. I was going to move to remove it. I think the fair thing is to get additional information. And Mr. Perney, your testimony was extraordinary, and your photos are compelling to me. But I appreciate Director Elliott and the Parks Department. Thank you both for being here, and the city attorney as well. So we'll get some more information during the delay. And thank you for that. So I appreciate it.
Any further discussion? Okay, so just to clarify for Mr. Perney, when would he have to show up again to speak on this item?
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks?
Typically 2 weeks, but I think
There may-
Mr. Perney would be notified. Is that correct, from the city attorney's office? Yeah.
Okay, so then someone will let you know when it's going to come up again, which will be
On June
Tentatively.
28th?
21st?
I believe the next claim will notify me either way, but I do believe it's today, but we'll notify.
Okay, 3 weeks maybe. Okay.
awesome. Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, it's a delay for 3 weeks to June 28th?
To the next
Or the
item.
next, whenever.
Just the delay.
Just delay, okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, can we please do a vote?
Raybold?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Does that make sense, Mr. Perney? Okay, perfect. All right. May we move on, or any further discussion on the main motion?
No.
Okay, seeing none, may we please do a vote on the main motion?
Raybold?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Beckius?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5C is renaming of Heritage School Building as Cunningham School District Number 113, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Councilwoman Washington.
I think this is an excellent name change. I am really happy to see the historical, going back to history and naming it what it was actually instead of the loaded name of Heritage. So thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just want to say that we are really lucky that it was relocated from the state fairgrounds. I know many kids had a chance to go in and play, but I know many children through Lincoln Public Schools do, I think it's 4th grade, do their rotation. But honestly, the siting of where they've placed the school is magnificent because it's at the top of the hill. And if I were in 4th grade again, I would feel like I'm going to my school in a rural community, in a rural farming community. It's so beautiful. So it's really just a lovely location, and it's a great name change too.
In Nebraska, where's No Little House on the Prairie? Okay.
Any further discussion on this item? Councilman McGinnis?
No, I can't agree more about what a neat experience it is, and it was a neat experience for my kids, and they enjoyed it greatly. And I'm not one to want to just make a change because it might be better for history, so I'll probably be going against this one. My kids called me and told me that they like to say they went to Heritage School, and it's going to be hard to say they went to Cunningham School because they did. They went to Heritage School. So I'm the one that likes vanilla ice cream. I like to keep things the same. So.
We know.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Beckius,
Yes.
McGinnis,
No.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1. Item 5D is approving amendment number 1 to the conditional zoning agreement for 8801 Holdridge, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilman McGinnis. Any further discussion? Seeing none, may we please do a roll call vote?
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
All right, let's move on to public hearing for our ordinances that are on second reading.
Item 6A is change of zone 16036B, application of Lincoln Federal Bancorp, Inc. to amend the allowable land uses from O3 office to B2 commercial uses in the existing Wilderness Hills Commercial PUD on property legally described as Lot 1, Block 1, and Outlot B, Wilderness Hills Commercial Edition, Lincoln, Lancaster County, Nebraska, generally located at at South 27th and Yankee Hill Road.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Heyer. I'm with TAC Architects, 2922 North 61st Street in Omaha. I'm here today representing the ownership. They were not able to attend, but it's pretty simple, straightforward. Currently zoned 03. We want to change it to B2 to support an express car wash. It's been through Planning Commission. There have been no questions or comments from neighbors, so I'll open it for questions.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next item, please.
Item 6B is Street and Alley Vacation 21001, application of Gatehouse Row LP to vacate right-of-way for R Street and T Street located east of North 36th Street, includes 2 east-west alley right-of-way areas north and south of T Street, generally located at 3600 R Street.
Good afternoon, Dan Marvin, Urban Development, 555 South 10th Street. I didn't say that earlier. What you have before you is a street and alley vacation that is for what we had previously discussed and call it the Wyuka Gatehouse project. And the total that was, I think in your packet, was this number, did not include this number as an addition. So the bold total is the amount. I think there's been a correction on that. What we're basically talking about is some very small number of square feet in various areas, and Michelle in our office used 2 different values. One was a value that was based on the purchase price for the Wyuka property, $19,000 an acre, works out to 44, I think it was 44 cents per square foot. And the other one was one that was used for residential lots in that area, which was $3 a square foot, and then we encumbered that with easements and other elements that devalued that property. And so that's the way we arrived at the number that we have. And I believe the purchasers are here. Mr. Houston, Mr. Hoppy are here, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions for Director Marvin?
No.
All right, seeing none, Mr. Houston.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. My name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900 here in Lincoln. Appearing before you today on behalf of Gatehouse Row Limited Partnership and Hoppy Development. Back on March 15th, this body approved 3 items for this project. There was a change of zone, a special permit approving a community unit plan for 98 dwelling units, and a comprehensive plan conformance approving the redevelopment plan for the Gatehouse Row redevelopment project. That enabled Gatehouse Row to submit its application to NYFA seeking bond cap authority to help finance this approximately $18 to $20 million project. We expect to hear final approval from the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority at its June 18th meeting, so that's approximately 11 days from now. We're optimistic of the success of that process. The item on your agenda today, as noted, it really deals with the vacation of a portion of R Street, a portion of T Street, and 2 narrow alleyways, all located east of 36th Street. Now, our title insurance commitment indicates that this plat was filed back in 1890, so this right-of-way was dedicated to the city of Lincoln 131 years ago, but nothing was ever built. This was in the days before we required security from subdividers in order to get the public improvements built. So nothing was ever built, and so this vacated right-of-way, once vacated, would be incorporated into the 98 dwelling unit apartment project. Now, the one request I have for you really relates to your authority under the Municipal Code, Section 14-20.020, that allows the city to either charge the price determined by the city or in exchange for something else. And I'm asking you to waive payment of the approximately $10,000 amount in exchange for the development of an 88 dwelling unit, 30-year, 100% affordable housing project. And the request really comes in light of the affordable housing or the Affordable Housing Action Plan adopted by this body, which the city committed to help close the funding gap. And all I'm asking today is not help close, but at least don't add to it. Because one of the things that has happened over the last 90 days is prices have escalated. And we're trying to penny pinch every dollar that we can for this project. We're scared of how pricing is going to be coming in. And if we can save $10,000 on right-of-way that's existed for 131 years, I'm asking you to help us do that. We are working on a redevelopment agreement with the City of Lincoln. That redevelopment agreement would be coming forward probably in the next 30 days, hopefully 45 days maybe. There will be a commitment for a 30-year term of 100% affordable units for the full 98 dwelling units of this project. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Houston?
I do.
Councilman Washington?
Thank you for coming down, and your proposal is very interesting. So typically, we would have asked for affordable housing units for the length of TIF, and in this case, I think it was going to be 20 years, not 15? Or was...
Two different items.
Okay.
Because
I'm mixing.
Well,
Okay.
there will be a 20-year capture period for the tax increment financing, but this project is going to be using low-income housing tax credits that are awarded by NYFA, which requires a 30-year affordability.
Okay.
So the 30 years is required by federal law, not
Okay.
by the community development law.
Okay, so...
Well, there's 15 plus 15 with a continued use period. It's a 30-year commitment.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman McGinnis?
Quick question for you on R Street. You're going to take the whole piece that's east of North 36th Street, and we won't have any access easements across there? Isn't there a bridge that goes across into Wyuka and hard surfaces that goes beyond this area?
There is a private access, but that's not at R Street, Fred.
It is at the end of R, is where the gates are.
Yeah, where the gates are?
Yeah, the gates are at the end of, the gates are at the end of R, Mr. McGinnis.
Okay, and then
But there is-
we weren't in the plan. I was asking, there isn't any future access for you to
There is no
access?
easement existing east of
36th Street.
East of 36th that I'm aware of.
Correct. There's nothing of record.
Okay, and we're not using any easement,
We're
putting
preserving
any
the
easement on
existing-
our street at all, or?
We're preserving the existing cobblestone brick access, but I think that's further south.
No, that
Is that the same one?
is the east part of
Okay.
that street is the existing cobblestone. But there are no easements on
Correct.
it at this point in
Correct.
time. And immediately east of this portion, there are no easements into the cemetery that I'm aware of.
Correct.
Okay.
There is the
I think
existing
this
gate.
is only in front of the house. as I
And
recall.
Fred's mentioning
Huh?
the gatehouse is located at 3600 R Street, which we're under contract to acquire. And that will be preserved as a part of the clubhouse for the project.
For the project, yes.
Okay.
We're just kind of asking you to give it to us.
Yeah.
And, you know, for the TIF, we're putting in $500,000 worth of public improvements, 2 streets. So, I mean, the budget's tight on this, which has not been helped at all in the last, OSB for construction in the last 60 days has almost doubled. So it's, the budget's pretty tight. Yes?
I have
Ms.
a
Ryan?
question, and it's sort of what Richard was asking. So you would like the land to be vacated and
Yeah.
to do, instead of us charging you for that, just to kind of take it off?
Yeah, in exchange.
Oh,
yes.
actually, we put it in the redevelopment, our
It'll be in the
proposed
redevelopment agreement. But the question is, then you own it, but are there going to be an easement? Are you going to offer an easement so that there can be access on that road on the west side of 36th Street that goes into the cemetery? It looks like that road connects, or doesn't it, to another road?
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to be giving Wayuka an easement or no?
No. This project will be privately held by Gatehouse Row Limited Partnership, and there will not be an access easement for Wayuka or its patrons to go through the property. That is correct.
The gate's closed now. It has been for a long period of time.
Yeah. It's not public access right now.
It is not, yeah. Now, there's a walking space next to it where it's open, and to be honest with you, I'm sure people cross it once in a while, but it is not,
That's what I was wondering, is
Huh?
that's where the neighbors that said they like to visit the,
Well, and I think
and
that
they
will-
were using
there
that
won't
walkway.
be vehicular access is a better way to say it. That's a good clarification.
I believe Councilman Shob had a.
I was,
Okay. Councilwoman Washington?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Councilman Shob and I were trying to look at the map and understand, because I was aware that pedestrians have used that bridge and crossed to the east side in
Yeah.
order to access the east side. And I was wondering if that would still be allowed.
That was certainly one of the things that we had discussed with the neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
and committed that they would have access to and could use the new trail, the hiking trail that's going to be planned for the area and built through the
Okay.
area.
So when you say access, when we were just speaking previously of
Yeah.
vehicular.
Yeah.
But you will allow for pedestrian access?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Houston or Mr. Hoppy? Councilman Shob?
thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Houston, you read something, and I don't remember the reference point about compensation. And I think your phrase was some form of compensation. Would you go over that again,
Well,
please? I'm sorry.
The existing municipal code, as it relates to the vacation of a public way, requires one of two things. The city has to determine the proper price, which Michelle Backmeyer has done in her memorandum, or the city can exchange the vacated right-of-way for something else. And what I'm suggesting is that in exchange for a 30-year commitment for an affordable housing project, I'm asking that the city waive the payment and refund the amount that was deposited with the city clerk in order to get on your agenda.
Thank you. That's what I need, some clarification on that. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Houston?
I guess in
Councilman Rabel?
exchange for that, would you also consider putting in writing that there would be public access or pedestrian access along that pathway?
Originally, one of the things we negotiated with the neighborhood, and we offered them that, and they refused it. So and it was part of a trade, but our issue was density, and you heard the neighborhood complain. And we were saying we would be happy to give you the easements across there and use of the walkway, and that in exchange for support of our density. which they would not do.
Okay, well, that issue's sort of moot because we approved the density.
Yeah.
But I guess, are you willing to, make good your offer to them of allowing them to have access and put that in writing? I think that's kind of where we're going at with, you're not going to give an easement for vehicular traffic. That makes sense. But what about pedestrian traffic? You said, yes, we are going to allow it. And I guess, Richard and I look at each other, well, it's always better to have it in writing. The work that we do, it's always better, a commitment in writing.
We would have a.
Before we get an answer, I would offer that this is not a negotiation with the neighbors. This is a negotiation with city council for any pedestrian access. So I'm not looking just for access for only people who live across the street. I'm looking for pedestrian access.
And we would have an opportunity to embody such an obligation in a redevelopment agreement, which is not before the body yet, not before this body yet.
But that is something that we can anticipate once we approve this.
I think that's certainly an issue that Director Marvin will bring up to us in our discussions.
Okay.
I have a feeling that might be so.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Any further any further questions from Mr. Hoppy or Mr. Houston? All right. And Mr. Hoppy, will you just say your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Ward F. Hoppy. I live at 1600 Stony Hill Road, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, did you have a question? Okay.
Oh, scratch my ear.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next item, please.
I'll be calling items 6C, 6D, and 6E together. Item 6C is text amendment 21002, request of the Planning Department Director to amend Lincoln Municipal Code sections 27.02.090 and 27.02.200 to make explicit that hotels or motels are a commercial use and to define short-term rental, amending section 27.06.070, household living use group table to add short-term rentals as a conditional use in certain districts, and amending 27.62.040, household living use group to add conditions required for short-term rentals, and repealing sections 27.02.090, 27.02.200, 27.06.070, and 27.62.040 as hereto existing, and the related amending Chapter 3.28 of Lincoln Municipal Code rental to hotel occupation tax by amending Section 3.28.020 entitled Definitions to amend the definition of hotel to include lodging facilities including one or more rooms and to include short-term rentals within the definition of hotel, and repealing Section 3.28.020 of the Lincoln Municipal Code, as well as the related amending section 5.38010 of the Lincoln Municipal Code to define rental dwellings as a rental of more than 30 days, and amending Title 5 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to licenses and regulations by adding a new chapter 5.39 entitled Short-Term Rentals to provide regulations governing short-term rentals and to establish short-term licensing procedures.
Good afternoon, David Carey, Director of the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you today for these related items. What I would like to do today is give you a high-level overview of how we got to this point and our process taken to address the topic of short-term rentals here in Lincoln, and then also a really short overview of what the text amendment that went to the Planning Commission includes. Then we have Chad Blaha here, the Director of the Building and Safety Department. He will go over the registration and enforcement piece to this. And then David Young will be available to us to talk about a brief statement on how the hotel tax piece of this fits into this as well. So those are the three big arms of this proposal that's before you today for a public hearing. Really wanted to, I also would like to say we have staff members from planning and other staff members from building safety and the law department here to answer any questions you might have. This process began 18 months ago. It was the beginning of 2020 before the pandemic, and our intention was to have this hearing probably about a year ago. What happened is the pandemic intervened. It became an item that was not as high on the list of priority, and so we did pick this back up again at the beginning of this year with the anticipation that we'd be able to be at this point, and thankfully we are, in order to move forward with these items. But at the beginning of 2020, we did have a robust public participation effort to go along with this, public discussion. We had several meetings with stakeholder groups, including operators of STRs, neighborhoods and neighbors, and landlords. And we received a lot of varied feedback from those groups. We did hold 2 open houses that had participation attendance from 77 folks, and those were in person prior to the pandemic. We also conducted an online questionnaire that we used to try to get feedback from the public. We had 209 completed questionnaires. People participated in that very robustly. We received a lot of good information, and that is what helped shape how we got to this point today. We also had 2 extended public comment periods online. What we did is we had an initial discussion draft back in 2020. We had that open for comment for several weeks. And then we also had a revised draft more recently in 2021 that also was open for about 2 months for comment. And so we took all of that process, all of that information to help us shape what is before you today. The 2 main things came out of those comments from that discussion draft from 2020. One was that we heard very loud and clear that there was not support for having a requirement for a residency requirement for the operator. And so that is something that was removed from that initial draft. And so you do not see that requirement in what's before you today. We also heard kind of from the other side of the discussion from neighborhoods that there was real concern with potential nuisance, noise, party houses, and impact on parking in neighborhoods. And so we took those 2 main kind of dumbbell sides of the topic and worked very diligently to come up with a compromise that we feel what is before you today is a very workable compromise to address a wide range of viewpoints on this and perspective on how best to handle this land use. So what you have before you is Text Amendment 21002. That is to explicitly define short-term rentals in the code and to establish them as a conditional use. And by conditional use means that we have some conditions that once they are met, they are given their approval. They do not require a public hearing. We wanted to make sure that the process, once those appropriate conditions for Lincoln, Nebraska were set, that they could go forward and have a very quick process to get approval. Within that, we have a few different things just to point out that I'm sure are aware of as having been conscientious in following this topic. But we do have a requirement of a 600-foot spacing between short-term rentals. That is something that was researched from different communities and looking at different options on that. And that is the piece of this that we feel helps with that compromise to ensure for neighborhoods that we do not have an agglomeration of these uses all in one spot. We limit the amount of impact such as parking in the neighborhoods with several of these operators in one spot. That was the main push behind that. We also are including a 4-week open licensing period at the point at which we would start to implement whatever we do end up adopting for this land use. What that will allow for is that any existing or newly decided to open short-term rental would be able to get the required license prior to enforcing the 600-foot spacing. So if there are 3 short-term rentals in any existing location right now in a residential neighborhood, if they come forward during that 4-week period, they would be allowed to get that license. We would not, and as long as they continue to operate, they would be able to continue to have that operation in those locations. So that is part of this proposal. Also, a part of this, and Chad will go through this in a little bit more detail, we are requiring an annual license through the Building and Safety Department and an acknowledgement that they're providing a facility for this land use that they meet basic life safety criteria. There wouldn't be an on-site inspection, but they would be attesting to the fact that they are meeting those requirements. Again, we feel like this proposal is the correct compromise at this point in time. We feel good about the process taken to get to this point. We feel like we received comment from a wide range of interested stakeholders and took into account their perspectives. And that's what this sausage-making process resulted in what is in front of you today. I think at this point I will stop, and I'm going to ask Chad to come up and go over fairly quickly that registration and enforcement side of this proposal. Thank you.
Chad Blaha, Building and Safety. Thank you, David. Stole some of my comments that I was going to make, but that's all right. That works. Like you said, I'm a Director of Building and Safety, and we will be responsible for the administering the registration process and any enforcement of the requirements that that are contained in the legislation that's before you. The registration process that we anticipate will be an online-only process for would-be operators to go online, submit their information, some of it standard information, address, location, some pieces of information about the unit itself. Like Director Carey mentioned, we will have a section where they will attest and certify that they're conforming with certain safety-related items, such as smoke alarm locations, egress provisions in the house for the sleeping areas, among other things in there. Like he also mentioned, the 4-week period at the beginning, there will be no spacing requirement as part of that registration process. So we will be flagging any of those registration applications that come in as, lack of a better term, grandfathered or what have you. So those will be able to remain in, I guess, perpetuity, so long as those operators are renewing on time and accordingly when that annual registration comes up. The fee right now we have proposed is a $250 annual fee for the registration. That's the same for the grandfathered or post 4-week period. And then after the 4-week period, there will be the location requirement attached. So it will not be an automatic approval. That's kind of the one place that staff kind of has to touch this, the approval process. We will have to look at the location of the application for the short-term rental and verify that it meets spacing requirements for any of those applications that come in after that 4-week period. So as far as enforcement goes, it's similar to what our housing section enforces on a regular basis for other housing related properties. Noise, clutter, whatever. However, in this case, we are looking to leverage a computer system to help us out with that. Like Dave said, we started this process a long time ago. We got to a certain point where we really didn't even know how many of these Lincoln had. And so we engaged a company that specializes in short-term rental administration or helping jurisdictions out in that regard, where they provide cities with a database that shows all of the short-term rental listings in that. Some folks use the county jurisdiction. We chose the city limit location to see how many we had. So that module was the first module that we engaged with that company. At that time, they were really the only company that provided this sort of service. And so what we would propose moving forward was adding some of the other modules to assist with, among other things, the compliance monitoring, where, once again, this automates the process. If a short-term rental pops up on any of those sites that are monitored, Airbnb, VRBO, it'll pop up in the process that the company uses. And if it can't match a license for that property within the Lincoln system, it will automatically generate a notice and send it out and say, hey, look, you're not in compliance. You need to follow the correct procedures to get registered. Stuff that our staff would manually be doing absent that. There's the online registration process itself is a separate module. One of the questions that I believe came up with some of the public process is, what are the avenues for neighbors to call in or let somebody know that there's an issue? Well, one of the offerings is a 24-hour hotline where neighbors can call in and get a live person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with this company, and then they have a contact information for the operator that they can get a hold of and say, hey, this is what's going on. You might want to look into this to make sure that your client is doing what they're supposed to. There's a couple of other modules that are offered that we would be looking to also contract with, it involving the tax collection, the occupation tax collection. And I think Mr. Young will address that a little bit, but one of them is the collection process itself. It can be included in that the online portal that the company offers. The other is the rental activity monitoring. With these short-term rentals, most of them require a verified stay in order to leave a comment, and so they actually can pull this information and give jurisdictions a fairly good idea of how many nights stay each of these operators are experiencing over the course of the year, and how much their occupation tax they should be responsible for. And so that, in a nutshell, is how we are going to propose the enforcement and registration for the proposed ordinance.
Are there any questions for Chad? Councilman Beckius?
Hi. So is the annual fee then proposed in order to cover the maintenance or the software costs with the third-party vendor?
Yes, it is. It is. And depending upon how many registrations we end up with, right now it would, if everything stays the same, it would almost cover. It wouldn't quite cover. So building and safety would be covering that. If the number of units increase, the more units that increase, the closer it comes to covering. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilwoman Ward?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Blaha. So a couple questions. First being with the system that you engaged with to determine how many we have in Lincoln, do you have a sense, an estimate of how many current?
Right now we have exactly 136
Exactly, 136.
identified addresses.
Very good.
Now that's identified addresses. There's many more listings.
Sure.
But those are just the ones that are
Okay.
identified.
Very good. And I wanted to clarify also on the renewal fee. I think you mentioned it's not an automatic renewal. Is there an
Correct. They
so,
would have to, there would be a renewal process that they will be sent the notice ahead of time that your renewal period's coming up. Get on the system and renew your license. Or
Does that mean an inspection is dependent upon, if I have to renew, do I have to go through an inspection in order to
there is
renew?
no inspections.
So,
Yep.
so I guess I'm trying to get at, I know I need to renew, no inspections, but it's just a process, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm thinking like other licenses and that we administer in the city.
Yep.
It's not dependent on anything except for me if I'm an owner, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, part of that system isn't auto-generated.
Got
As
it.
long as the contact information is accurate and valid, there's an auto-generated and sent notice to renew. And we can choose how far in advance to send that to the operators.
No, very good. I always get a little anxious when I hear that it's only online registration, only because perhaps there are owner-operators that, for whatever reasons, don't have computers or access to internet. Will there be a system, I know you're cringing, I don't blame you, whereby they could walk in or perhaps have another?
Perhaps we could have a kiosk
Okay.
available at the counter for that, but I don't believe we will do paper applications for this. It's like I said, the housing staff is what's charged with administering this program.
I understand.
And
Just
how
wanna
long have we
mention it.
had four inspectors and a chief?
Sure.
How
I get it.
long has that been? For at least 17 or so many years. So the more of these type items between short-term rentals, transitional, the different items that have been added to that section's plate, the the more we need to look at leveraging,
Sure.
the technology and these type of items to keep off. As an example, I mean, complaints that the group is obligated to go out and investigate has gone up over 43% this year to date over the previous 3-year average. So they're stretched pretty thin, and so like I said, anything we can do to leverage.
Yep, absolutely. Just throwing it out there for those innkeepers that may be out there. You just never know. I do understand that. Lastly, I should have started with this. I wanted to thank all the departments, planning department, David, you and your Director Carey, you and your staff, and of course your staff as well, and the law department. When this first came up 18 months ago, which I can hardly believe it's been 18 months, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I had a lot of email traffic, and then I don't know if it was the pandemic or COVID or just your great work on the open houses, but the changes have been good, and I appreciate those because I was at a couple, I think at both of them, and you did respond, and my email traffic has subsided. I don't know about anyone else's. I don't know if that's good or bad. I guess we'll find out, but I do appreciate the changes that were made and the response. So I think with that, I will say thank you very much.
Last but certainly not least, Interim Finance Director David Young. The 4% tax that's being proposed is the exact same that we charge the other hotels. We expect that to raise about $10,000 a year in revenue, which will offset the cost of the electronic collection software.
Are there any questions from Director Young?
Yeah.
Councilwoman Washington?
So that was one of my questions that came up when I think Councilwoman Ward asked Director Blaha about the registration fees and whether or not the registration fee would pay for the administration. He said it would come short, and so now the occupancy tax would cover that difference, and so we would not be.
That is correct. That's my understanding.
We would cover the program. So what do you envision that this would be a harder tax to collect than it would from a hotel?
What I'm interested in is the technology that the software Host Compliance is using to identify the different single-use, single-day rentals, and can we automatically assess that with the actual booking? I know that's done on Airbnb. I know that's done on VRBO. I think we'll be interested to see that we can get that implemented here as well. That will make it very easy to collect it. I think if we have to go the paper route and send out letters, yeah, it'll probably be a little more difficult.
And when folks are working through this private company who has the software, I mean, I know they can do a lot of really interesting things. They can mine information from all sources, social media and the like. Will we have a policy about the currency that the tax is paid? So are we going to accept cryptocurrency, or are we going to ask that it all be USD?
I believe our current policy is that we only accept U.S. denominated dollars.
I'm not lobbying for cryptocurrency.
Neither am I.
Are there any questions for Director Young? Councilman Shob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Mr. Young, thanks for coming forward. As Councilwoman Ward said, we did get emails from people, and I'm still a little confused, and I hope you can help me clear up. Occupation tax, lodging tax. I don't know what's going on here. What is the 4%?
This is an occupation tax, and it makes it the same as the occupation taxes for hotel rooms. I do not know the difference between the lodging tax. I will follow up with you on an email with all of you on that.
Are there any other questions?
I believe it is Visitor Bureau, but I don't have gospel on that, so I want to make sure and follow up with you guys on that specifically.
Are there any other questions for Director Young? I know Director Carey and Director Blaha kind of got away with without a ton of questions. Does anyone have any questions for Director Carey?
Maybe for Director Blaha.
Carey, after
Okay.
my colleague is completed.
And I'm going to get into some details I was going to ask later, but I got a question about the registration. Okay, I register and then I decide to pull my registration or pull my license. I no longer am going to operate it as a B or as an Airbnb. Does that license then automatically go back onto the market? And how do people know that it's available if they live within 600 feet of there? Do you have a list of people maybe that have all applied within 600 feet? Or do you go to the next person in line? Or how do you handle this 600-foot separation?
Okay. Let me see if I understand your question. So let's fast forward to past the 4-week period, or
Right.
maybe 2 years from now.
Right.
And you are either grandfathered or you have a license that you legally got and you met the spacing. If you let yours lapse, perhaps there's somebody else that was within that 600-foot radius that maybe wanted to at one time, and now they would be, and we're told no because of the spacing. And then how are they notified? I think Mr. Carey would probably be able to speak on this, but we're going to we're collaborating with planning as far as maintaining.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a good question because that's a real world possibility, obviously. And I think that this process will evolve when certain conditions present themselves. At this time, we don't anticipate announcing that something has freed up. I think we would just, if it lapses, then it would be sitting there and a new area would be available if somebody
It would be a
picked
first
up-
come, first serve,
Pretty
probably?
much. That's pretty much how we're seeing it right now, yes.
Okay. My question would be then, what would stop me from having a $250 license, then telling somebody down the street that really wants it, that, hey, pay me an extra $1,000 and I'll tell you the time and that I turn my license in, you can go get a new one. I
think that would be
mean,
a-
so
that's a
people
private
can make
trans-
money off it, so
It's a-
maybe a lot of people ought to be registering.
I would view that as a private transaction that the city wouldn't get involved in. We would see it once that person that got wind of an opportunity came forward with that at the timing where they could then qualify for it. I mean, that's how we would handle that one.
And then this other 600 feet, I mean, and I'll ask you later how you actually got to the why 600 feet, 2 city blocks, basically. And then is it as a crow flies, or is it the way you have to go to get to a location, or?
So I can have Rachel Jones come up at this point. She's got some images that explain and show how we get to the 600 feet. I think that would be helpful. It would allow you to kind of visually see
I think that would
how
be
it would
helpful.
work.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel. So what we have, and this information was provided at the Planning Commission stage of this as well, and was actually part of the memo that was sent out to you all so that you had some more background on this. And Rachel, why don't you just walk through kind of what these images mean?
Okay, Rachel Jones, Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. So here's an exhibit of what the spacing might look like with some traditional city blocks. With the property in the center in question being a property that was rented or operated as a short-term rental, and then the 600-foot buffer around it being the red line, and all of the properties identified in red there that would then be prohibited under the spacing from having a short-term rental.
Okay.
Just as one example of how this might look.
And this also applies to downtown, correct?
The spacing only applies in the residential, ag-residential, and agricultural districts. So areas of downtown that are commercial zoning wouldn't have the spacing piece.
And part of the logic behind that is that those commercial districts very often do have hotels in them allowed, and so we would treat them similar to that in those commercial districts. I would know, perhaps Rachel, you could just walk through kind of the differentiation we have with multifamily as well for spacing.
Sure, yes. So the spacing for multifamily is not going to apply internally within the building or complex, but it would apply externally. So similar to this, maybe I can pull up another example if I can find it. but so a multifamily premises, here's an example you can look at, would need to meet the 600-foot spacing to other licensed short-term rental properties around it. The exception is that we're proposing that those multifamily uses with 100 or more dwelling units would be exempted from this spacing requirement.
And some of the logic behind that is that those larger multifamily footprints are already set up with setbacks and buffers away from other residential areas that would normally surround it. And so that the concern with having several of these next to each other would not be as present when you have a large apartment complex involved in this. And also, the reality being that we wouldn't be, those larger complexes already have such as on-campus parking. And so the parking issue of this would also be addressed on site with that apartment complex. So we felt like the potential impact is much mitigated for these larger multifamily complexes.
Right, and then all multifamily uses would be limited to no more than 10% of their total units as short-term rentals, but at least one unit would be allowed, assuming they met all the other conditions.
Councilwoman Washington?
Yeah, I thank you very much, Rachel, for coming forward and explaining this, but I have a question about the 100 unit and the spacing of the 100 units. So there is no internal spacing requirement within the 100 unit. This doesn't apply for that. But if you don't live in the 100 unit complex, but you live, say, 400 feet away from it, could you have a short-term rental?
No. So the spacing is measured from the property line. So let's assume you had a multifamily use that was less than 100 units, and let's say they had some of their units as licensed short-term rentals, then another nearby property that was within 600 feet could then not operate a short-term rental because of spacing.
So 600 feet is always there, regardless of whether or not you're a 8-unit, a single family, or a duplex.
Yes, it's always there unless you have 100 or more units in your complex, and assuming you're in those ag or residential districts.
Yeah, the commercial districts wouldn't have the spacing requirement.
But if I'm a single family next to a 100 unit, I still have to be 600 feet away from the 100 unit. From the property line.
Is it the property line or building?
It's measured from the property line.
Councilwoman Raybold?
But with a multifamily, it's treated a little bit differently, isn't it? Because it is subject to inspections.
They would not have an inspection for the short-term rental. They would have their normal inspections as a multifamily apartment complex, but not for specifically the short-term rental.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councilman Becky? Oh,
yeah.
Councilman Beckius?
Go to Beckius, yeah.
Ms. Jones, I had a constituent reach out and ask if they were in the process of purchasing a property and or constructing a property currently that may not be finished at the time of registration or the 4-week open window period. Will there be any allowances for those builders or developers that may be in process currently?
You know, I would say on that question, maybe better answered by either building and safety or city attorney's office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Washington?
I have a question about multifamily that's a little bit different than what we've talked about. So in the downtown area, commercial high rises, they're not covered by short-term rental, by this regs, right?
They are covered. They just
The short-term rental unit would still need to be registered.
It still need to be registered,
But
and
they don't have to abide by the spacing.
they don't have to abide by spacing, but they do have to abide by the ratio, right? 1 unit for 10?
Yes.
Okay.
10%, 10% of your units, or a minimum
Okay,
of one.
so that's one issue, and then I have a question about residentially zoned multifamily. So two different scenarios, and I want to start with the second one first. So if I am in a multifamily a building that's in a residential neighborhood that's not commercial, and we're a condominium, so we're one of 10 condominiums. I am curious, and we undoubtedly have rules about how we act together, and I am curious why you would want to put the short-term rental regs on top of a condominium situation where they could make a determination about how they would best want to manage their condominium. Like, no short-term rentals, or we would allow 30% or something. Can you explain, if you talk to folks who were, I know we don't have a ton of condominium units in Lincoln outside of high rises, super high rises, but we do have some, and I'm just curious if you were able to talk to condominium owners about that. And then I want to come back to my first issue.
So a condominium regime would be similar to a homeowners association as far as a private entity having different regulations than what, or additional regulations than what the city regulation would require. So it's very possible, if not likely, that a condo regime in a building might not allow short-term rentals. And that would be a private regulation that would not allow it. A homeowners association, especially in our newer areas of the city and the developing areas, often have similar types of limitations. And so we do know that those do exist out there here in Lincoln. And so those neighborhoods, as long as they're enforcing their own own rules within the homeowner association, they would not allow short-term rentals. That would be a higher level of regulation than what the city would have. But that is how we handle those, that we would not intervene and force them to allow them. What I would point out by saying that, making that point though, that's one more reason why we feel it is important with this kind of compromise proposal, which has some limitation on the potential for several operators to be in close proximity, because there are going to be the potential is to have more of these in the older established areas of the city that do not have covenants through a homeowner association normally, as do the newer areas on more regularly the edge of the city. So that's part of that calculation of trying to come up with that balancing act of trying to look out for the well-being of some of the older neighborhoods as well. So it's just something that we thought through and is a part of the thinking as part of what the proposal has in it.
And now downtown condominiums, so high rises, condominiums. What is the thinking about wanting to limit how many short-term rentals could be in those when the condominium unit could say, we would encourage it and we would allow greater than 10%?
That's not where I thought you were going.
We
Go ahead.
I will go back to what I said earlier when Chad was up here as well. I think that some of these situations could come forward, and we might need to look at these as time goes on. If there is that much of an interest for that, it might require some type of tweaking. We didn't hear that through our process. Okay. That wasn't something that came forward or bubbled to the top, so we didn't really feel like that was a major thing to take into account.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? I have a question, but I'm going to save it for later. Okay. Thank you.
If I might.
Yeah, Councilman Beckius.
If we might talk about registration here, and I don't know if Chad wants to come up or city law. The regulation as proposed isn't necessarily 100% clear as to the registration process. And as I mentioned, I had a constituent ask if I'm currently building or currently buying something that may not be under my ownership or completed by the time that the 4-week window comes up for registration, may I still register that address and submit to the city a date under which that permit may be in place?
Well, I guess I can start out answering. I mean, the way
A buildable lot in the system.
mean, the information that's required to do within the chapter, or Title V regulations anyways, you have to provide either proof of ownership, or if you're a lease, or if you are a leasee, you have to provide proof that you have permission from the owner to operate the unit as a short-term rental. Thank you. You also have to certify that you meet those, 5 or 8 different safety-related requirements. That's what the regulation says to apply for. So in that regard, it's pretty clear, the requirements for being able to make an application. We would probably have the opportunity to look at individual cases, like Director Carey said, that we do our best to think of a lot of different conditions or situations. We certainly aren't going to think of all of them.
Absolutely.
And so I guess I'd maybe let Abby say whether or not I, as the code official, would have that ability to be flexible. I mean, part of the thing is being consistent. I mean, one of the things that in my department we get held to is being as consistent across all of our customers as possible. And
Absolutely.
The easiest way to do that is to have pretty
Black and
clear
white. Mhm. Yep.
expectations.
So Abby Luttrell, Law Department. I would say, as written now, the Title V changes do not contemplate a house that does not yet exist. We're asking now for people to certify that there are all of these safety features, means of egress, guardrails, carbon monoxide detectors, and I don't think an applicant could attest that those things exist for a house that is not yet built.
Now, I would say your example of if the ownership has not quite transferred yet, the current owner could make application for the license, and then it is transferable.
Sure.
Right.
Would building and safety feel comfortable, say, if they had approved building plans for a building that's currently under construction, maybe opening up a window of time to say you need to get this open, this project finished and open in order to apply for a short-term rental license within a said window, be it 6 months or a year or something like that, knowing, because of the building plans you have approved, that those safety features will be eventually in place?
I think that never say never. I don't know that that makes it easier for us in terms of it introduces an opportunity for would-be applicants to I don't know if gameplay is the right word, but to we don't have any guarantee that that's eventually going to happen. And I guess on the surface, without having a whole lot of time to think about it, I would prefer not to add variables like that. But at the same time, we haven't thought of everything, and we'd have to probably discuss it internally how to address those individual items, as long as they remained individual circumstances. If it starts to be where we start to get a ton of these applications on, maybe either applied for or not issued, because where do you stop the line? Do you stop it at issued building permits, or just maybe legally applied for building permits, or is it issued permits as long as they're moving towards completion with the appropriate inspections? Or we get building permits that come in that they pay for their permit, they don't issue it, and they don't start, and all of a sudden 18 months goes down the way where we're expiring the permit and having to deal with that. So it's would consider it, but wouldn't want to plan on that as a method of getting a short-term rental license.
Okay.
Are there any further questions for staff? I have one question. If this goes through, a person has a license, it gets pulled, is there an appeal process in place for a person to appeal the pulling of their short-term rental
What do
license?
you mean? Oh, you mean if their license is revoked?
Right.
Yes, that would, we included I believe that would go to the Housing Board of Appeals, similar to the way apartment licenses are appealable.
Okay.
Yes.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, seeing no further questions from staff, we are past the 2-hour mark. Had a request to take a 5-minute recess. Do we need a motion to do a 5-minute recess?
No.
All right, well, we'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll stay adjourned for 5 minutes, and we will come back at 5:15. All right, we are now back from recess. We're still on the short-term rental portion of our agenda. We heard from staff. Council asked questions out of staff. We'll now open up to public comment. Just to remind everyone, when you come up, please say your name, your address, and you're limited to about 5 minutes. And we'll start off with Mr. Bud Sneinhorst.
Hey, I got a cheering section. How about that? Good evening, Bud Sneinhorst, President and CEO, Lincoln Independent Business Association, 620 North 48th Suite 205. Members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm here tonight to comment on the short-term rental issue, obviously, before you. I believe as we review this ordinance and we take a look at LB 57, which was passed and signed into law in 2019, it may be wise to tap the brakes and take a pause. I would draw your attention, LB 57 was introduced by Senator Moorfeld and signed by the governor in 2019. And in Section 1, Subset 2 of LB 57 states, a municipality shall not adopt or enforce an ordinance or other regulation that expressly or effectively prohibits the use of a property as a short-term rental. I believe that the 600-foot provision that the council's been talking about tonight would fall under that category, especially when we talk about the section of that where it says expressly or effectively prohibits the use of a property as a short-term rental. LB 57 does carve out a section which would allow a homeowners association or a condominium association to have specific regulations on these type of short-term rentals that we're talking about. The 600-foot provision, I think, raises some other issues. For instance, I think somebody mentioned it's about 2 city blocks. So if I decided that I wanted to convert my current home into a short-term rental, Airbnb, VRBO, whatever they are, I actually talked to a friend who pulled up the GIS map, and I would eliminate 91 parcels from the opportunity. You saw that map earlier that the staff put up. There's a lot of parcels in there. 91 parcels, and within where I live, there's an apartment building which would affect that whole complex, which has more than 100. And I would also point out, ironically, I'm surrounded by park on 2 sides. And so we're cutting out people from the opportunity to start these businesses and use these. So I think it's just maybe time for an opportunity for the council to take a pause on this issue. Make sure we answer several questions related to that 600-foot provision, because I do think there may be a statutorial issue. I don't know if the city law department or maybe the attorney general's office might want to weigh in on that if it's in violation of that state statute. The other thing I would just like to bring up, and I think Councilman Beckius alluded to this when he was asking questions, was that 30-day window seems kind of restrictive. That 30-day window to get the, I'll call it grandfather clause on this this regulation or this ordinance. You know, we've got people that are building. I don't know that we got a full answer on if that would qualify, because in some of the things that they need to check off on that list, you can't really show that until the building's completed, right? You can't show a carbon monoxide detector on a slab of cement as you're building a project. And so I'm not saying it's bad. I think, as Councilwoman Ward mentioned earlier, we've come a long way on this issue since 18 months ago, which seems like 3.5 lifetimes ago since this came up. We've made progress on that. I just think maybe it's a good idea to take a pause. Take a pause, make sure that we're following the statutes correctly, make sure that we're not jeopardizing the city for further lawsuits or any of those types of things. I guess I'd ask her any questions if anyone had any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none.
Hopefully the meeting Richard? I'm sorry, Mr.
I was
Councilman
going to say
McGinnis.
go Huskers.
I was going to say, hopefully you guys are able to get through the meeting by 6 o'clock so you can get home and watch the baseball game. Thank you for your time.
Actually, I do have one question.
Okay.
So you mentioned the spacing requirement and the state statute with that, and that's the reason why we should pause. What about the other regulations that the planning department is proposing? Are there issues with those also that you see?
I think the biggest one to me is expressly prohibiting a property to be a short-term rental. And so really I think the 600-foot one is the most pressing one that would eliminate them from being a short-term rental. I think maybe the 10% in an apartment complex could be an issue as well, just because, and I'm not a lawyer, there's a lot of people that could answer that question better than I am. I'm just offering an observation maybe for the council to consider before moving forward to save maybe headache down the road.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Who else would like to speak on this item?
I'm going to say good evening versus good afternoon because we've kind of got to that point. I'm Jan Bain, and my address is 7300 Martell Road, Hickman, Nebraska. And I am an STR owner, and I think my property represents pretty well exactly where the council maybe has a concern, which is those residentials without an HOA. So I wanted to provide you a look into my Airbnb for the last, I began my Airbnb October of 18, and I went back through every reservation that I had and wanted to give you a look at what type of reservations we're seeing in those type of neighborhoods. You'll see on the far right, vacation. I got 2 in the last 2.5 years that actually said they were vacationing here. And I'm going to tell you, those weren't really what I would call vacations. They were a family in Kansas that said, we just want to get out of Kansas. So we're coming up to Nebraska for a 4-day weekend. It's a long weekend. The other one was a family in Illinois that said, we've driven through Nebraska, but we've never stopped in Nebraska. So I'm bringing my family. We're going to spend, 3 or 4 days in Nebraska. Other than that, I have not had any reservations that said vacation. Large events also seem to be where there's a concern with short-term rentals. Obviously, COVID kind of impacted our large-term events. But if you look in 2018 there, I only had large events, 10. That includes Husker football games. That includes concerts. If you look, my primary is folks that come here for work or some kind of a conference type of event. I also have included in those work ones folks that are here for, say, family medical needs, like their spouses at Madonna, and they're here for a week at a time to visit somebody, a loved one that's in the hospital. I consider that somewhat work labor. Looking down into 2019, obviously with COVID, that was impactful, but another large one is folks that are moving from state to state, and they stop in Nebraska because I'm moving from Chicago to Denver. And we just needed a spot to stop, and it's my entire family. We got our 4-legged friend, or family member, or I'm driving a U-Haul. I need a neighborhood maybe to stay in. Here is the grand totals for the last 2.5 years for me. 62 of them were pass-throughs, and this is just from one of the sites. So I am on both VRBO and Airbnb. This one is just Airbnb. It's easier to pull data from there as a user. But you can see predominantly it's work and conference and pass-through. Not very many large events. It's also family, visiting family. That link up with family that I have on there, that is not they're here to link up with somebody who lives here. That is, I live in Chicago, my sister lives in Denver, so we're meeting halfway. And we want a family home to gather in, to visit and socialize versus each get a hotel room, but to still have some privacy of your own rooms. So I guess I want to point that out before I go into some additional information I have here. That we're not a vacation destination, we're a pass-through state, but I think STRs make it better quality when they are here. So the 2 issues that I took away from the last meeting were, first one being STRs holding large gatherings like game day activities. I don't think anything that we've heard the city say is changing from STR being able to have a gathering. When you limit the number of guests that an STR has, or specify the number of guests that can sleep in a room, that doesn't change from me having a Husker football game at my activity at my STR. What changes that is abiding by what the sites already have on their site for, I selected no parties. So when somebody makes a reservation, they know they cannot have a party at my place. Now, a 60-year-old's birthday party, and they have some family, I see that differently. But I don't let them host a Husker football game party. Most of my reservations for the football games are from out of state. They don't want to be downtown where all of the other Huskers hang out. They want to be just their Cougars or whatever that come to town and be together with a couple families. So limiting the number of guests to spend the night or how many per room does not prevent a guest from having these large gatherings. They can still have the gatherings. I think we implement making them have the rule no parties on their link with the site, and then we enforce it. The second concern was concerns that too many STRs in a neighborhood, especially the one like mine, that has no HOA. So here is, with the 600-foot rule, mine isn't quite as good as Rachel's was, where it was the actual city block.
Just as a heads up, that is the 5-minute mark, so we'll give you about 20 more seconds, okay?
Okay, this is what it looks like if you apply the 60 feet or 600 feet. You have 15 STRs, you have 120 neighbors, just giving you a picture to look at. If you let it randomly play out, because we're not a vacation destination, it's going to self-regulate how many we have in the city. Here's the same look at just random, and you have the same 15 STRs, you got 68 neighbors, which means you're going to decrease the number of complaints because you have less neighbors if you have a couple that are next to each other that the same owner has, they operate it. I think you're looking at more complaints if you leave the 600 feet. And then just lastly, I also want to point out that a single room, if I have an STR and I'm only renting out a room, that is the same as if somebody rented out an entire house, and it's the same 600 feet that apply. And Richard, I also want to say, if you, this here same one, if this person right here cancels their STR, guess where the only STR can go if these are STRs? It's right there. All of these white space don't get the opportunity to put one in.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Ms. Bain? Councilwoman Washington?
Ms. Bain, thank you for coming to testify. I couldn't tell if you were speaking in favor or against numbers of people per room.
So I have a concern with the number of people per room because right now it's 2 per room, but a room can be the dining room. There's a limit of 12 per STR. But like my property, I have one large room in the basement that easily fits 2 full beds. Why would we say that you can only have 2 in that room? And when I brought it up to the board last time, they talked about, well, that's based on number of rooms. So like your dining room could be considered a room. Well, I think that becomes an issue when you're talking about inspections and things like that. A normal hotel room, you can have the 2 beds plus ask for a rollaway and you can put 5 in it. So I'm not for sure why we would try and tell an STR you only can have 2 per bedroom.
Any further questions for Ms. Bain? I have a question. So you have one property that's an Airbnb, correct? How many beds are in that?
It is a 10-bed, or it sleeps 10. There's 4 bedrooms and it sleeps 10.
Okay. Then my next question is, not counting, last year, but the year before that, out of the 365 days in a year, how many days were occupied?
So I would say my place remains occupied about 75% of the time. I can tell you the month of May, I only had 5 nights that it was not booked.
Okay, so about 75% of the time. Would you be willing to leave the data sheet that you had?
Sure, I will.
Thank you. Any further?
Who should I leave that
If you just want to leave it with Sony, our city clerk. Any further questions for Ms. Bain? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for coming out and testifying.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time and all of your patience and dedication. My name is Stacy Manson. I live at 1226 South 30th Street here in Lincoln. It is my pleasure to speak on behalf of active and future short-term rental owners here in Lincoln. We have a few in the back here that we have kind of conglomerated and come up with some reasons as to why I agree with the gentleman from LIBA why we are jumping a little too quickly on this legislation. As a lifelong Nebraskan, it is amazing to see the growth in Lincoln and how far we have come. We are a haven for nature lovers. We have beautiful hiking areas, and we have foods from all kinds of places. I mean, we've got a Jamaican restaurant, vegan sweets, and of course, Renza's. And as an ever-growing population, that's a good thing. However, we do run into issues. which I would consider an opportunity. That is what I consider short-term rentals for Lincoln. They represent a local experience, a comfort that you're with friends and family at home. And by introducing this legislation, we're limiting those abilities. A couple of highlighted concerns are as follows. I am a realtor here in Lincoln, so I represent the property rights of owners, and this legislation is limiting those. Not being able to do what you wish with your property is right in and of itself an issue. So vote no to encourage home ownership, growth, and encourage people to continue buying homes for not only personal residences, but additionally short-term rentals. Short-term rentals also provide an additional means of income. As you guys know, COVID has left some people out of jobs, out of additional ways to make money. Renting out a room in your house is one of those opportunities. We're limiting that for many, many people by implementing the 600-foot rule. And I'm very thankful we took out the you have to live in the property, but we're also kind of exempting those people that may really, truly need to rent out their room to afford their mortgage. So there need to be some type of exceptions that we haven't really considered, much like Mr. Tom Beckius brought up about new properties, and like Richard brought up about if someone leaves, what's the process then? The limiting for spacing also is an opportunity to encourage local tourism. Right now, the way it's set up, it's focusing Airbnbs down in the downtown region and district. We have so many small local businesses outside of that area and so many opportunities of tourism for Lincoln. I mean, think of Holmes Lake, Pioneers Park. If we limit that 600 spacing in all these older, beautiful neighborhoods, we're limiting those tourist destinations and those small businesses the opportunity of people coming from even just passing by through states to go try this new food or this local restaurant. As also with COVID, we have noticed an increase of people that are staying due to health restrictions. They don't want to go to hotels, talk to the front desk people. They don't want to interact with other people because they are high risk and sick, and so they don't want to be around people. And now we're saying, oh, you can only have one in this neighborhood. I've had lots of people stay at my Airbnb that were high risk health, and during COVID, we shouldn't be limiting this. We should be encouraging it. The current proposal does not define what exactly a valid short-term rental is. We did hear some more information today. This is the most information I've heard from building and planning, which is good news. But, sorry, I kind of lost my spot. But we are still blocking and not defining the neighborhood. So if Sally Sue, who doesn't have an Airbnb, registers in a neighborhood, but Joe over here needs the money to help pay for his mortgage, he can't get it because Sally Sue doesn't want someone in her neighborhood, which just doesn't seem fair. So how do we make it valid that Sally Sue does have an Airbnb and is not taking the opportunity away from Joe? Excuse me. Airbnbs are also to encourage entrepreneurship. It's creating new and exciting ways to experience Lincoln. My Airbnb is just north of the Lincoln Zoo. We have pictures of the zoo. We have a whole map of the different zoo animals, and we've had many people go and visit the zoo. And so it's just a fun way to kind of incorporate our local attractions. So let's not limit that. Short-term rentals also encourage revitalization. There are a lot of flippers in town who have now since taken properties that were blighted and in areas that aren't necessarily the most habitable neighborhoods, and they've taken them and turned them into absolutely stunning properties. And I will tell you, pride of ownership is contagious. You look at this property that's been rehabbed, and the neighbors start to take care of their yard more too. So let's keep doing that and support property values and neighborhood revitalization. I don't know if we're going to do a public map with the areas, but I quickly want to say that might pose a safety hazard. I mean, vacant properties, people like to steal from vacant properties. We have guests in them. I want to protect them. So if there is a public map of the 600 feet, I think it needs to be taken with great care in how it's presented to the public, because that could be a risk. And then you guys have answered a ton of questions today, but I think there are a couple things that we still need to consider. And probably the biggest one that I got out of this is, are we creating a burden on building and safety for less than, it's like 0.02% of the housing in Lincoln? If there's 136 Airbnbs and we have like 120,000 housing units, 0.02% to create such an issue for building and safety seems a bit unreasonable for me.
Are there any questions? I have a question.
Yes.
I really don't know the answer to this. What does it take for Airbnb or VBRO to shut down a person from advertising on their website? Like, is it like a certain amount of like negative reviews, or?
To be honest, I don't have that issue, so I can't say for sure. But because it is a peer-to-peer reviewed website, if I was a client, which I am a client of Airbnb, and I see a host that has really bad reviews, I'm not going to choose to stay there. So it's a bit self-regulating, which is another reason why it's more of an imposition on our government to regulate it when it's already self-regulating. But I'm not totally sure when you get kicked off. I don't have that issue.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Peter Katz, 6333 Apples Way, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68516. I appeared on this issue in front of the Planning Commission. I was brief in my remarks with regard to the legal impediments and the state statutory law that restricts the city's ability to regulate in this area. And I thought I'd be a little bit better prepared this time, actually copied the ordinance. Mr. Steinhorst referenced it. It's always easier for me to see these things in writing, and so I've put it in writing. It's up on the board if people want to look at it. But it's quite clear. A municipality shall not put restrictions on these types of properties. Shall not. And if you decide you want to do it, the burden shifts to you that you've got to demonstrate the primary purpose is health and safety, not because you think it makes a difference. And then there's a lot of restrictions. I don't think there's any way to salvage this particular ordinance and make it comply with this. Perhaps your legal counsel does, but as it sits on its face, doesn't hit it. And apart from that, the evidence that I've heard, been 18 months, I've heard one bad horror story of Airbnbs at Capitol Beach Lake. Right? That's the damage. That's what we're protecting everybody from in our community by going through all this regulatory hoops. Capitol Beach, with or without STRs, has party problems. Just like the North Bottoms has party problems. They exist whether we have STRs or not. I think STRs are probably a very effective way, because of the peer review that they mentioned, to regulate the area. I don't think we need any additional regulations in this area because it doesn't pose a threat to our community, safe or healthy or welfare of anybody. I love experiencing other communities through short-term rentals. Much better experience than a hotel. Much better. So I'd encourage the city to turn this regulatory opportunity way. Less is more in this case, and not do anything that you don't need to. There isn't that big of a problem that requires you to impose this regulations on short-term rentals. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for Mr. Catt? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that want to testify on this item? I'm looking back at the crowd of people back there. Anyone else? Are you good? Okay. Awesome. Well, if there's no one else to testify on this item, then so no action's going to happen this week. We vote on it next week, so tune in next week. Oh, Councilwoman Washington?
Chairman Bowers, can I ask a question of staff?
Sure.
Thank you. No, Mr. Carey telepathically understood. I meant him. Thank you. So Ms. Mason talked about a limit that this regulation would limit an individual from renting one room in their house. Can you true, not true?
Well, the regulation wouldn't limit that at all.
Okay.
It would be identified as a short-term rental at that location, and they could decide to rent
So you
one room or
don't
not.
have to be distant. You can be a resident owner.
Yes.
An owner who lives in the house
Yes.
and rents rooms.
And the
Okay.
way that this is proposed, that would still need to meet the other parts of the regulation.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carey, thanks for coming forward. Why are we here? Why is this a problem? How did this get on our radar?
Very good question. I guess I think I'm going to weave in a little bit of my rebuttal opportunity as the applicant, just to kind of put some of these other points on the record or respond to some of the comments, because we've had some very good comments. This will answer your question eventually.
Thank you.
I want to be clear that we, as far as the city staff, we do not view short-term rentals as a problem. We view them as an opportunity. We view them as a good land use. Part of the reason why we are here is that this use has up to this point never been defined in our zoning. It fell under previously, before we had LB 57 approved 2 years ago, it fell under our home occupations. And within that, it had a limitation of only 20% of the square footage of that house could be used for this use. It was never really defined, and therefore, when LB 57 was discussed during the legislation process and then approved, we knew that we needed to address this topic in some way. And so that's really the impetus for getting to this point. It was a combination of the state legislation as well as just realizing and acknowledging that our code does not address this topic specifically. So we're accomplishing a few different things by going through this process. And then as we have gotten through the process, we did hear a lot of comments about concerns. So the concerns are out there. What I would say is that the fact that we don't have a lot of testimony from either side today shows that what we ended up coming up with our proposal was a good result of a process that we attempted to try to meet the concerns of the community. There are members of the community that are concerned with I'll call them the bad apples, and I fully acknowledge that that is a very small percentage of short-term rental operators. We have the vast majority of our operators are great, and I agree with the testimony previously that this use most often elevates the quality of that property. So I just want to be very clear that that's where we're coming from. So what we have tried to do here is provide that balance point for our community, while keeping in mind that we do have LB 57, now state statute, in place to bounce this off of, and to be clear that we can still do what we're proposing. As we've gone through the process, we have had opportunity to look at that. We do believe that this proposal is defensible. I would also say that this proposal is not sacred in the sense of it's not the only answer to this topic. I put that to you as the deciding board on this.
No pressure.
But it is the result of a very robust process, and we feel good about the process we took to get here.
Councilwoman Ward?
I want to ask one more follow-up. You don't have to answer it now. You might get to it. You said you did a questionnaire. You had 209 responses. Can you give us an overarching yay, nay? What stood out and what didn't stand out in the way of responses to the questionnaire?
The clearest result of that was that there was definite position from those that responded to say that we should not require primary home occupancy of an operator. That was probably the clearest thing that came out of that. So that is probably the driving force of why that was removed out of the proposal. The other big part that we received out of that is that we did ask respondents to say, what are your concerns with this use, if you have any? And really what bubbled, it was a wide range of those, but what bubbled to the top were the items that are actually in LB 57 as one of those items that can be regulated by a locality, which is nuisance, i.e. party houses, noise, and things like parking. Mm-hmm. And so those items can be regulated by a locality, even with LB 57 having become state statute. And I would say that that's been the focus of how we kind of framed this as we went forward. So one way to handle that is to not have as many of those uses in one spot, so that those issues are not as potentially problematic. So that's the thinking behind the proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Carey, I was just noticing on the legislation, and thank you, Mr. Catt, for the copy of the bill. it is item B toward, in section 5. So thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted to note, back to the genesis of this, and again, maybe I was the only one on council that got a lot of email traffic, but specific, no, just for the record, no. A lot of, to Mr. Katz's point, of noise at Capitol Beach, and I live out there, and if there's a lot of parties still, I'm missing those invitations. So I don't doubt you. But I did get a lot of feedback about that area. Also Fallbrook, I represent Fallbrook, got a lot of comments. It's always those bad apples, and I know the operators, I know it, that are here today are stellar, and we hear you, and we see you, and we know that. I represent downtown, where we have operators as well, and I heard a lot from downtown and near south, and those older neighborhoods that we're trying to make this work for everyone, and so it's never perfect. So I just wanted to reiterate, in the beginning, there was a lot of noise. Well, I shouldn't say that word anymore. There was a lot of concerns. So I think with that, it's time for me to be quiet tonight. But I just wanted to reiterate that, Director Carey, and again, thanks to those who are here today. It's really important for us to hear what you had to say. And again, thanks to your team as well.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Director Carey.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends the rebuttal, so then we'll move on to the next item.
Item 6F is approving a lease agreement for a 20-year term with 2 additional 10-year terms at the city's option between the City of Lincoln and Victory Park LLC related to new location for the city's Aging Partners Division on property generally located at 600 South 70th Street.
Good afternoon or good evening, council members. Randy Jones, Director of Aging Partners. Real quickly, the history on the policymaking decisions on this project is that about 5 years ago, the council approved a development plan for the Victory Park development off of 70th Street. And we owe a lot of gratitude to those fighters in the community who went out there and pushed this project through the VA. One of those people are with us today, Roger Lemke, who was working for Senator Fisher at the time. So thank you for that effort, Roger. Secondly, the council approved conformance with the comp plan a couple months ago. And then a few weeks ago, council also approved a package for COPS funding related to which this project was a part of. We've talked already about the need for this, the fact that the downtown facility location is not suited for future use. We have opportunity to expand program to an expanding audience out at Victory Park and improve access. I want to make some important points that this will not negatively impact neighborhood centers other than the downtown center. The other neighborhood centers will remain intact and available as long as they're being used. Transportation will be provided to people door to door if they would like to utilize the center at Victory Park. And there is a bus line, and I've confirmed with LTU that that will remain out to the Victory Park location. Actually, I believe there's 2 lines that go out there. The terms on this lease is for 34,500 square feet. We have a term of 20 years with 2 renewable 10-year terms. There's no rent for the property, but we will be responsible for taking care of the property, maintaining the property, and of course the renovation to meet our needs. It does have a budget impact for Aging Partners. We'll be approaching the City Council for an $80,000 increase in operational funding, and that's because we have $112,000 payout on the financing on the COPS. May I answer any questions you have?
Are there any questions?
Actually, I think the architects say we possibly could be in there the spring of '22. I'm hoping we delay it until after construction costs go down. I want to say that I will be on a fishing lake a week from today and will not be here during the vote, but if you have any questions, feel free to pick up the phone or email me this week. And Kay Wenzel over here in the red will be here at the council meeting during the vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Roger Lemke, 2501 North 74th Street, 68507. Jane, good to see you again. Richard, Tammy. I here today representing the Seniors Foundation. The Seniors Foundation has been the champion in proposing this entire project, which started as, if you recall, a EUL, extended use lease. Took us a while to get that under control, and it took some effort in dealing with the VA. And so far what we have is a tremendous amount of effort going on. You've seen it in the Victory Park Apartments. You see it in the clinic. We have another vision beyond that. There are two other words that come into play here: multi-use and joint use. This has become more than just a veterans campus, if you will, and the opportunity now to combine the needs of our veterans along with the needs of our aging population can happen by placing the Aging Partners location at the VA. That's been our vision all along, and I hope you'll agree that it's a worthy vision. Enhanced access is also critical. Again, when you take a look at if you see it from 70th Street, it's not easy to get into. But when you drive around the back to where the clinic was, you've got great parking and great access. I can speak to that for a 94-year-old mother and a 101-year-old mother-in-law, that access is important. And finally, growth potential, for our senior citizens. That is, there's more that's going to be going on out there, new buildings, new businesses, and I'm going to guess that many of those are going to be focused on our aging population. So you'll see more and more synergy and more activity directed at improving the lives of our senior citizens. One last point, and call it an asterisk. 13 July is a drive-through Flag Day sponsored by Seniors Foundation. It's a chance to drive out to the VA, slowly drive around through, and you'll see the access and the facilities up front, close and personal, as what's happening in that really vibrant location now. So, mark it down about noon, 13th July, Flag Day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Councilwoman Ward?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but a comment. I would be very remiss not to thank publicly General Lemke for your assistance in pushing this project over the finish line several years ago when I had the honor of working on this amazing project when I was at the Seniors Foundation. Yes. It is the best, one of the best public-private partnerships in this city has ever seen, and because of the hard work of you and at the time you were in Senator Fisher's office, and we all know what knocking on the VA door is like sometimes. So thank you for that. We're almost there, and the council has been so supportive over the years, those of you that have been around. And so thank you very much, and thank you, Director Jones. So we really appreciate all you've done.
And thank you what you've done for our seniors.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will then end the public hearing, and then we'll move into ordinance's third reading.
Item 7A is approving a real estate purchase agreement between the City of Lincoln and VH Properties LLC for the sale of city-owned property generally located at 1301 South 120th Street, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Beckius?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 7B, approving an agreement for tower space and appurtenances between the city and New Singular Wireless PC LLC to occupy and use certain city-owned parcel of real property and tower generally located at 2201 South 84th Street, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Councilman McGinnis.
Yes, I would like to move this to a 1-week delay.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion on the, you said 2 week?
1 week.
1
at
week
this
delay.
point.
Any discussion?
There's a couple things that still need to be worked out a little bit going forward. Well, hopefully it's only 1 week, but it may drag on. I'll let you know.
All right. Any questions or discussion on that?
Hearing only, or?
Councilman Jobe?
I want to compliment Sonia on getting the word right. She nailed it.
I practiced and I looked it up.
All right. Seeing no further questions or no further, Councilwoman Ward?
Vote only or public hearing, everything?
Oh, that's a good question.
Everything? Or just vote?
It's just,
It's just a
we're
vote
not
now.
on a public hearing. It's
Just
just a voting
action.
session.
Oh,
It's
just the
for vote.
action, just the
Yeah.
vote. Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
So vote on the delay, right?
Can we, this is a procedural question, Councilman. Would you rather have it be an open delay and you tell us when you've settled the issues? Or do you think that you can settle, can you settle them in a week?
I don't know. I
Okay.
mean, I don't want to leave it as an open or
Okay.
put it on pending.
Oh, yeah,
I want
no,
us
no.
to try to see if we can
Okay.
come to conclusion here in a week.
Full pressure.
We'll put
All
some
right.
pressure on us,
Let's
right?
keep the pressure.
If you give me 2 weeks, I'll take 2 weeks.
So it's 1 week.
So just give me one.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's vote on Councilman McGinnis's amendment to delay for a week.
Okay, Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, and so then we don't vote on the main motion since it's been delayed a week. I believe that's the end of our ordinance's third reading.
Our resolutions first readings are items 8A through 8I. Our ordinances first readings are items 9A through 9E. And our pending list items are 10A through 10C.
I move we adjourn. Second.
Moved and seconded by, I think Councilman McGinnis beat you to it.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
any discussion?
No discussion on adjournment.
Oh, all right, then let's take a vote.
Yes.
Beckius,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes,
Motion carried 7-0.
we're adjourned.
Practice the